Hansa Studios sound engineer Michael Rother noticed something. David Bowie came every morning at 10 a.m. Lou Reed came every evening at 8 p.m., never at the same time. One day Rother asked Bowie, "Do you know Lou Reed is recording here?" Bowie's face didn't change. "I know," he said, "nothing more." 3 days later, Rother asked Lou the same question. "Do you know David's working here?" Lou adjusted his glasses. "Yes," he said. That was all. But Rother had noticed something else. Bowie's reservation time started changing, as if he was avoiding Lou's hours, or was Lou's schedule avoiding Bowie's? Who was running from whom? And why were both insisting on using the same studio? Berlin had dozens of studios. Why had both chosen Hansa? Rother developed a theory but never shared it with anyone, until one night in March 1978, when something happened. Don't forget to subscribe, because we're going to tell you what happened that night at Hansa Studios and reveal the true feelings of two men who couldn't escape each other even in a divided city. Late 1976, Los Angeles. David Bowie was dying, not physically but spiritually. Cocaine had consumed him, reducing him to 95 pounds of paranoia and skeletal fragility. The thin white Duke character had stopped being performance and become reality. Friends watched in horror as Bowie became the cold, fascistic persona he'd created. His marriage to Angie collapsed. She took their son Zowie and left. Bowie's house had become a prison of mirrors, occult books and white powder. He looked in the mirror one December morning and didn't recognize himself. That's when he decided, escape to Berlin. Cold, grey, anonymous Berlin, where nobody cared about British rock stars. A divided city still scarred by war, where a pop singer was just another foreigner. At the same time in New York, Lou Reed faced his own reckoning. His marriage to Betty Kronstad had ended badly, with accusations and bitterness on both sides. Years of substance abuse had taken their toll. His liver was struggling, his relationships were toxic, his creativity felt blocked. The Berlin album he'd made in 1973 to prove independence from Bowie still haunted him. Critics had called it a masterpiece of depression, but the public had rejected it. Lou wondered about the real Berlin, the actual streets where his fictional characters Caroline and Jim might have walked, suffered, died. In early 1977, Lou decided to go there. Neither man knew the other had chosen the same city. Both were running from their pasts, seeking renewal in the same cold, divided place. David Bowie arrived in West Berlin in late 1976 and felt immediate relief in the anonymity. He rented a modest apartment at Hauptstrasse 155 in Schöneberg, a working-class neighborhood far from anything glamorous. The apartment was deliberately simple, basic furniture, white walls, no excess. Every morning he'd wake early, eat a simple breakfast of bread and cheese, then get on his bicycle and ride through the city. He visited museums like the Brücke Museum, sat for hours in cafes watching Berliners go about their lives, slowly relearned how to be human without cocaine or fame or the protective shell of characters. His partnership with Brian Eno flourished here, creating what would become the Berlin trilogy: Low, Heroes and Lodger. The music was minimal, ambient, sometimes wordless, influenced by the city's stark beauty and division. Eno brought intellectual rigor and experimental techniques. Bowie brought emotional rawness and melodic instinct. Together they created soundscapes that captured Berlin's strange mood: isolated, tense, beautiful, damaged. Hansa Studios, where they recorded, sat right by the Berlin Wall on Kuttener Strasse. You could see guard towers from the windows, hear sounds from East Berlin drifting across the death strip. This proximity to division infused the music with tension and melancholy. The title track of Heroes was inspired by lovers Bowie had seen meeting at the wall, kissing despite barriers and guards. That image of connection persisting in a divided world became the emotional heart of his greatest song. The recording process was therapeutic. Bowie forced himself into disciplined routine: arrive at 10 a.m., work until 4 p.m., no late nights, no excess. Iggy Pop had come to Berlin with him, and they kept each other accountable. Iggy was recording his own albums, The Idiot and Lust for Life, with Bowie producing. Taking care of Iggy helped Bowie stay disciplined. By mid-1977, Bowie had stabilized, clean from cocaine, weight returning to healthy levels, creating critically acclaimed work. Then he heard Lou Reed was coming to Berlin. Lou Reed arrived in Berlin summer 1977, staying at Hotel am Steinplatz in Charlottenburg. Unlike Bowie, Lou didn't come to heal, but to confront. He wanted to see if real Berlin matched his imagined darkness, if the streets actually felt like the nightmare opera he'd created in song. While Bowie explored art museums and rode bicycles, Lou gravitated to rougher bars and late-night spots where the city's darkness lived. He found the places where marginalized people gathered: drug addicts, prostitutes, punks, outcasts. He was researching, in a sense, gathering material for what would become Street Hassle. The title track of that album, an 11-minute epic about drug deals gone wrong and bodies dumped in streets, was directly influenced by his Berlin wanderings. Lou would sit in bars like Risiko and SO36, watching people, listening to stories, absorbing the atmosphere. Berlin in the late 1970s was a strange place. West Berlin was an island of Western freedom surrounded by communist territory, accessible only through specific corridors. The city attracted artists, anarchists, draft dodgers, anyone running from something. Lou felt at home among the refugees and misfits. When Lou learned Bowie lived in Berlin, he made a choice: acknowledge but don't connect. In interviews, when asked if he'd seen David, Lou said, "Berlin's small but big enough for both of us." It was diplomatic but distant, maintaining the cold peace established at the 1975 Grammys. Lou also ended up at Hansa Studios, booking evening sessions to work on demos and arrangements. The studio manager carefully scheduled them apart. Mornings for Bowie, evenings for Lou. Nobody wanted awkward confrontations in the corridors. Michael Rother started noticing patterns that seemed too deliberate to be coincidence. Bowie's sessions, initially locked in at 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., began shifting. Sometimes 9 a.m., sometimes 11 a.m., occasionally extending to 7 p.m. When Lou booked regular 8 p.m. slots, Bowie's sessions suddenly started running later, ending just before Lou would arrive. Lou's arrivals became equally erratic, sometimes 7 p.m., sometimes 9 p.m., as if adjusting to avoid overlap. Rother started calling it the dance, two artists orbiting each other with mathematical precision, never meeting but never fully separating. Other Hansa staff noticed the pattern too. The receptionist mentioned that Bowie would casually ask who else was booking the studio that week, then choose times adjacent to, but not overlapping with Lou's slots. Lou did the same thing, inquiring about schedules before committing to times. They were clearly aware of each other's presence, tracking each other's movements, but maintaining careful distance. It was like watching two magnets of the same polarity, unable to touch, always repelling, yet locked in relationship by that very repulsion. But why this elaborate avoidance? They weren't enemies. The 1975 Grammy handshake had been cold but not hostile. Rother's theory: they were both in Berlin for escape and renewal. Seeing each other would break the spell. Berlin worked because their pasts didn't exist there. No Transformer, no Berlin album disaster, no Savior Saved dynamic, no rejection. But each man represented the other's history. Bowie reminded Lou of being Bowie's project, of losing artistic control, of Transformers' glossy packaging. Lou reminded Bowie of rejection, of his help being spurned, of Berlin the album proving Lou could fail without him. Their carefully constructed new lives required distance. In March 1978, this avoidance was tested. Bowie was working late in Studio 2, trying to capture the right guitar tone for a track. The session ran over, approaching 8 p.m., Lou's usual arrival time. The studio manager came in nervously. "David, Lou Reed's session starts in 20 minutes. Bowie looked at the clock, then at the unfinished work. He had to choose, leave and abandon the session, or stay and risk running into Lou. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Bowie said, "Give us 15 more minutes. We're almost there." They worked fast, got the take, and Bowie packed up quickly. As he left through the back entrance at 8:10 p.m., Lou was entering through the front at 8:15 p.m. They missed each other by 5 minutes. The studio staff breathed collective relief. While avoiding each other personally, both men were creating masterpieces. Bowie's Heroes, released October 1977, was revolutionary. The album balanced pop accessibility with experimental courage. The title track's declaration, "We can be heroes, just for one day," resonated universally, becoming an anthem for anyone who felt limited or divided. The production was immaculate, the performances passionate, the vision complete. It was Bowie, at his most artistically pure, freed from commercial pressure and cocaine-fueled paranoia. Lou's Street Hassle, released February 1978, was equally powerful but darker. The album was raw, direct, unflinching in its depictions of street life's cruelties. The title track told interconnected stories of drug deals, overdoses, and moral compromises with brutal honesty. Bruce Springsteen made a spoken-word cameo on the track, lending unexpected mainstream credibility. It proved Lou had found his voice again, that he could create devastating work without Bowie's production polish or anyone else's help. Critically, both albums were praised as career highlights. Music journalists began writing comparison pieces. Bowie and Reed, both in Berlin, both creating masterpieces, but never together. The narrative captured public imagination, two former collaborators, now in the same city, creating parallel bodies of brilliant work while maintaining mysterious distance. Journalists tried to interview both about each other. Bowie's answers were carefully diplomatic. "Lou's doing great work. I'm happy for his success." Lou's responses mirrored that neutrality. "David's albums are interesting. Good for him." No warmth but no hostility. Just professional acknowledgement wrapped in protective distance. Throughout 1978 and into 1979, there were multiple near misses that became legendary in Berlin's tight-knit music scene. The closest encounter was at SO36, a legendary punk club in Kreuzberg, in November 1978. Bowie was there with Iggy Pop on a Tuesday night, watching Die Totenhosen, a local punk band making waves. The club was packed, dark, deafeningly loud. Lou arrived around midnight with a different group, positioning himself on the opposite side of the venue. Neither initially knew the other was present, but then someone told Iggy, "Lou Reed's here, other side of the stage." Iggy, always more direct than Bowie, said, "Should we go say hi?" Bowie paused, sipped his beer, then said, "Let's give him space." They stayed put. Simultaneously, someone told Lou, "Bowie's here with Iggy." Lou adjusted his sunglasses and replied, "Yeah, I figured he would be." He didn't move to approach. The two men spent the next hour in the same club, separated by about 50 feet, and a crowd of thrashing punks, never making eye contact, never acknowledging the other's presence. Another near miss occurred at the Brücke Museum in early 1979. Bowie came on a quiet weekday afternoon to see an exhibition of German expressionist paintings. He spent time with each canvas, taking notes in a small notebook. Lou came to the same exhibition an hour later, with similar interest. Both men were visual art enthusiasts. A museum guard recognized both and was astonished at the near collision, but timing kept them apart. Bowie left through the main entrance just as Lou was entering through the side entrance. They missed each other by minutes. The most significant near miss was at Hansa Studios in March 1979. Through a scheduling error, both men were accidentally booked for Studio 2 at 3 p.m. on the same Friday. When the studio manager discovered the mistake Friday morning, he panicked. He called Bowie first. "David, I'm terribly sorry, but there's been a scheduling conflict. Lou Reed is also booked for 3 p.m. today. Would you be willing to take the 1 p.m. slot instead?" Bowie, to his credit, was gracious. "Of course, no problem." Crisis averted. But after hanging up, the manager sat at his desk wondering what would have happened if he hadn't noticed the error in time. Would both men have shown up at 3 p.m.? Would they have been forced to finally talk? Would it have been awkward, angry, or surprisingly warm? He would never know, and perhaps neither would Bowie and Lou. By late 1979, both men were preparing to leave Berlin behind. Bowie had accomplished what he'd come for, beaten cocaine addiction, regained physical and mental health, created 3 groundbreaking albums that would influence music for decades. The Berlin trilogy was complete. He was ready for the next phase, which would be a return to more commercial music with Scary Monsters, and eventually the massive success of Let's Dance. Berlin had been necessary medicine, but the treatment was complete. Lou Reed's relationship with Berlin had always been more temporary and exploratory. He'd never intended to live there permanently, just to visit, absorb, understand. By 1979, he'd extracted what he needed. Street Hassle had been his Berlin statement, proof he could create powerful, uncompromising work on his own terms. He'd proven independence from Bowie's production, from commercial pressures, from anyone's expectations but his own. He was ready to return to New York and continue evolving. The Berlin period revealed something important about artistic relationships. Collaboration can be powerful, but temporary. Bowie and Lou had created Transformer together, a perfect synthesis of both their talents. But staying together creatively would have limited both. Lou needed to prove he could succeed without Bowie's production. Bowie needed to explore sounds and ideas beyond traditional rock. Berlin gave them both space to do exactly that, and the fact they did it in the same city while maintaining distance created unique dynamics, competition without confrontation, mutual influence without direct collaboration, respect without intimacy. Brian Eno, who worked closely with Bowie throughout the Berlin period, later offered perspective on the situation in a 1987 interview. "I think they needed to know the other was there, doing good work. It pushed them both to be better. But they also needed distance. Get too close and old patterns would resurface, the savior and saved dynamic, the producer and artist hierarchy, all the baggage from Transformer and Berlin. The physical distance let them be influenced by each other's presence while remaining creatively independent. It was actually quite mature, though it probably didn't feel that way at the time. The parallel lives demonstrated that not all relationships need dramatic resolution. Sometimes the most honest ending is ongoing, respectful distance. Bowie and Lou would continue this pattern for decades, aware of each other, occasionally commenting on each other's work in interviews, sometimes appearing at the same industry events, but never truly close again. And that was fine, even healthy. They'd given each other what they needed at crucial moments, and now were giving each other space to grow beyond their shared past. Today, Hansa Studios still stands on Köthener Strasse, where the Berlin Wall used to divide the city. The wall came down in 1989, and the death strip became parks and new buildings. The studio is now a tourist destination, with plaques and photos commemorating Bowie's time there. The rooms where Heroes was recorded preserved almost as shrines. But there's no plaque for Lou Reed, even though he worked in those same rooms. That omission is somehow fitting. Lou was always the shadow to Bowie's light, the underground to Bowie's mainstream, the cult figure to Bowie's superstar. But both men left indelible marks on Berlin, and Berlin left indelible marks on them. The Berlin parallel lives remain one of rock history's most fascinating what-ifs. What if they had reconnected there? What if they'd put aside pride and distance and collaborated on a Berlin album together, combining Bowie's production brilliance with Lou's raw songwriting? Would it have been a masterpiece surpassing Transformer, or would old tensions have destroyed it before completion? We'll never know, and perhaps that's appropriate. Some questions are more interesting unanswered. What we do know is that the separation worked. Both men emerged from Berlin stronger, clearer, more artistically confident than when they'd arrived. The city had taken two damaged artists running from their demons, and through its cold embrace and divided geography, had given them space to heal and create separately. Sometimes the most valuable thing two artists can give each other isn't collaboration or reconciliation, it's distance, respect, and the freedom to grow independently while knowing the other is out there, doing their own brilliant work,